Sarah Martinez stepped out of her dusty pickup truck and adjusted the baseball cap covering her dark hair. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the small strip mall parking lot where Hawkins Gun and Ammunition sat between a Mexican restaurant and a dollar store. She had driven 45 minutes from the naval base housing where she lived with her husband Marcus and their 2 young children. The mission was simple enough. Marcus was deployed overseas with his SEAL team, and their home security system had been acting up. Last week, someone had tried to break into their neighbor's house while the husband was also deployed. Sarah wanted to purchase a handgun for home protection, something she could safely store, but access quickly if needed. She had done her research, taken a firearms safety course online, and even practiced at the base's shooting range with her friend Jessica, whose husband was also military. Sarah knew exactly what she wanted: a reliable, easy-to-use pistol with good safety features. She had her identification, her military dependent card, and enough cash for the purchase. The bell above the door chimed as Sarah entered Hawkins Gun and Ammunition. The shop smelled of gun oil and leather, with rows of rifles mounted on the walls and glass display cases filled with handguns. Behind the main counter stood a heavyset man with graying hair and suspicious eyes. His name tag read, Dale Hawkins, owner. 2 other customers browsed the store, an older man examining hunting rifles and a younger guy in camouflage gear looking at tactical accessories. Both glanced up when Sarah entered, then returned to their shopping. Sarah approached the counter confidently. "Good afternoon. I'm looking to purchase a handgun for home protection. I've done some research and I'm interested in seeing a few specific models." Dale looked her up and down slowly, his expression skeptical. "Home protection, huh? What does your husband think about you wanting a gun?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "I'm sorry?" "Your husband. Most women who come in here are just picking something up their husband already chose. You sure you know what you're doing with firearms?" Sarah felt her cheeks flush but maintained her composure. "Actually, yes. I've completed safety training and I've been practicing at the range. My husband is currently deployed with the Navy." Dale snorted. "Deployed. Right. Look, lady, guns aren't toys. They're not fashion accessories either. Maybe you should stick to pepper spray or a baseball bat." The other customers had stopped browsing and were now listening to the conversation. Sarah felt their eyes on her, but she pressed forward. "I understand firearms are serious. That's exactly why I've taken proper training. Could you please show me the models I'm interested in?" "Which models?" Dale asked, clearly expecting her to stumble. Sarah pulled out her phone where she had saved screenshots and notes. "I'd like to see the Glock 19, the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, and the Sig Sauer P320. I want to compare the grip sizes and trigger pulls." Dale's eyebrows raised slightly, but his attitude didn't improve. "Those are all serious weapons. You sure you can handle the recoil? Most women can't handle anything bigger than a .22. I've fired 9mm rounds during my training. I'm comfortable with the caliber." The older customer near the hunting rifles shook his head and muttered something under his breath. The younger man in camouflage crossed his arms and watched the exchange with amusement. Dale reluctantly moved toward the handgun display case, but stopped. "You got your permits and background check paperwork ready? This isn't California where you can just walk in and walk out." "I have all my identification, and I'm prepared to complete whatever paperwork is required," Sarah replied calmly. "Identification like what? Driver's license isn't enough for a gun purchase." Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out her military-dependent ID card along with her driver's license. "I have my military ID as well." Dale glanced at the cards dismissively. "Dependent ID, so you're not actually military. You're just married to someone who is. That's different." The comment stung. Sarah had heard variations of this dismissal before. Military spouses often faced the assumption that they were somehow lesser. that they hadn't earned their connection to the military community. My husband serves our country, and I support that service. I manage our household, raise our children, and handle family emergencies while he's deployed. I think I'm capable of making responsible decisions about home security. Dale leaned back against the wall display. Look, sweetheart, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I've seen too many situations where wives get ideas about guns and someone gets hurt. Maybe you should wait until your husband comes home and let him handle this. The younger customer snickered. She probably saw it in a movie and thinks it looks cool. Sarah's patience finally snapped. Excuse me, but I don't appreciate your assumptions. I'm a college graduate, a mother, and a responsible adult. I've taken proper safety training, I understand firearms operation, and I have legitimate security concerns. I have every legal right to make this purchase. Dale crossed his arms. Right or not, this is my store. I don't have to sell to anyone I don't feel comfortable selling to. And honestly, I don't feel comfortable selling a weapon to someone who's going to be alone with it and might not know how to handle a real emergency situation. That's ridiculous. You don't know anything about my capabilities or experience. I know enough, Dale said firmly. I think you should leave and come back with your husband when he's home. Or find another store. The shop fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Sarah stared at Dale in disbelief. She had encountered discrimination before, but never so blatantly in a business setting. Are you seriously refusing to serve me because I'm a woman and my husband isn't here? I'm refusing to serve you because I don't think you're ready for the responsibility. That's my professional judgment as a licensed firearms dealer. Sarah looked around the shop. The other customers were watching her, waiting to see what she would do. She felt humiliated and angry, but also determined not to cause a scene that might reflect poorly on Marcus or the military community. Fine, she said quietly, putting her identification back in her purse. I'll take my business elsewhere. Probably for the best, Dale replied, already turning away from the counter. Sarah walked toward the door, her face burning with embarrassment and anger. As she reached for the handle, the younger customer called out, "Don't take it personal, lady. Some people just aren't cut out for guns." She paused, hand on the door handle, fighting the urge to respond. Instead, she pushed through the door and walked quickly to her truck. Sitting in the driver's seat, Sarah took deep breaths to calm herself. She pulled out her phone and considered her options. There were other gun stores, but the nearest one was another 30 minutes away. More importantly, she was shaken by the encounter. She had expected bureaucracy and paperwork, but she hadn't expected outright dismissal and disrespect. She scrolled through her contacts and found Jessica's number. Her friend answered on the second ring. "Hey, Sarah, what's up? I just had the most awful experience at that gun store in town. The owner basically threw me out because I'm a woman shopping alone." "Are you serious? What happened?" Sarah recounted the entire encounter, her voice shaking with leftover anger. Jessica listened without interruption. "That's absolutely unacceptable," Jessica said when Sarah finished. "You handled it better than I would have. I would have demanded to speak to a manager or something. He was the owner, and honestly, I just wanted to get out of there. But now I don't know what to do. I still need a gun for home security, but I don't want to deal with that kind of treatment again. You shouldn't have to. Look, my husband Tom knows some people who might be able to help. Let me make a few calls. I don't want to make a big deal out of this." "Sarah, you're not making a big deal. That guy made a big deal by discriminating against you. You have every right to be treated with respect as a customer, especially as a military spouse. Don't let him make you feel like you did something wrong." After hanging up, Sarah sat in the parking lot for a few more minutes, watching people come and go from the other businesses. A part of her wanted to just forget the whole thing and find another way to handle home security. But a bigger part of her was angry at being dismissed so casually. She started the truck and began the drive home, thinking about Marcus and wondering what he would say about the situation. He would probably be furious, but he was thousands of miles away and dealing with his own challenges. As she drove through the desert landscape, Sarah's phone rang. It was Jessica calling back. "Hey, I talked to Tom. He's pretty upset about what happened to you. He wants to know if you're okay and if there's anything he can do to help." "I'm fine, just frustrated. I'll figure something else out." "Actually, Tom has an idea. He knows the guy who runs that gun store. Apparently, Dale Hawkins has a reputation for being difficult, especially with women and minorities. Tom thinks someone should have a conversation with him about proper customer service. I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble. Trouble already happened when that guy decided to discriminate against you. Tom just wants to make sure it doesn't happen to other military spouses." Sarah considered this. She had been raised to avoid conflict and to handle problems quietly, but she also knew that staying silent often meant problems continued for other people. "What kind of conversation?" "Nothing dramatic. Tom just wants to explain why that kind of treatment is unacceptable, especially toward military families. Sometimes people like Dale need to understand the consequences of their behavior." "I guess that would be okay, as long as it stays professional." "Of course. Tom's good at keeping things professional. He should be home in about an hour. Why don't you come over for dinner and we can all talk about it?" Sarah agreed and ended the call. She had no idea that Jessica's husband, Tom, was about to make some very interesting phone calls of his own, or that Dale Hawkins was about to have a very different kind of afternoon than he had planned. Tom Richardson put down his phone and stared out the window of his home office, his jaw clenched tight. At 34, he had served 12 years as a Navy SEAL, including 4 combat deployments. He had seen discrimination and injustice in many forms around the world, but hearing about Sarah's treatment at the gun store hit him differently. This was happening in his own community, to the wife of a brother-in-arms who was currently serving overseas. Jessica appeared in the doorway, still holding a dish towel from cleaning up after lunch. "You look like you're planning something." "I am," Tom replied, turning away from the window. "Sarah doesn't deserve to be treated like that. And if Dale Hawkins thinks he can disrespect military spouses in this town, he needs to be educated." "What are you thinking?" Tom picked up his phone again. "I'm thinking it's time Dale met some of Marcus's friends." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Tom, please tell me you're not planning anything crazy." "Define crazy." Tom was already scrolling through his contacts. "I'm planning something educational." The first call went to Chief Petty Officer Mike Gonzalez, who was currently on leave and living about 20 minutes away. Mike answered on the third ring, sounding relaxed. "Richardson, what's going on? Thought you were enjoying some downtime." "I am, but we've got a situation. You know Marcus Martinez from 3rd Platoon?" "Yeah, good operator. He's overseas right now, isn't he?" Tom explained Sarah's experience at the gun store, watching Mike's mood change through the phone conversation. By the time he finished, Mike's voice had taken on the edge that usually appeared before mission planning. "So this clown thinks he can disrespect one of our wives because she doesn't have her husband there to back her up. That's about the size of it. Where's this gun store?" Tom gave him the address. "I'm thinking maybe Dale needs to meet some of Marcus's friends. Show him what kind of community support military spouses have." "I like it. Professional visit, right? Just a conversation about customer service." "Absolutely professional, but thorough. Give me 20 minutes to make some calls. I think a few of the guys would be interested in a little community outreach." The second call went to Lieutenant Dan Torres, who was off duty and working on his motorcycle in his garage. Dan had served with Marcus on 2 deployments and considered him one of the finest operators he'd known. "Marcus's wife got thrown out of a gun store?" Dan's voice carried the controlled anger that made him effective in combat situations. "For what reason?" "For being a woman who wanted to buy a gun without her husband's permission, apparently." "That's not going to work for me," Dan said flatly. "What's the plan?" Friendly educational visit. Show up and explain why that kind of treatment is unacceptable. How many of us are we talking about? However many want to participate in some community education. Dan chuckled, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. I'll reach out to Rodriguez and Thompson. They're both in town. And I think Stevens is back from training. The calls continued. Within 30 minutes, Tom had contacted 8 members of Marcus's SEAL team who were currently stateside. The response was unanimous. Dale Hawkins needed to learn about respect and community standards. These were not hot-headed young soldiers looking for a fight. They were experienced professionals who understood the importance of military families and the sacrifices spouses made while their partners deployed. They had all left wives, girlfriends, or family members behind during dangerous missions, and they knew how vital community support was. At 2:15 p.m., exactly 1 hour after Sarah had left the gun store, Tom Richardson pulled into the parking lot in his black pickup truck. He was wearing simple civilian clothes, jeans, boots, and a plain gray t-shirt. Nothing flashy or military-looking. 30 seconds later, Mike Gonzalez arrived in a blue sedan, then Dan Torres on his motorcycle. By 2:20 p.m., 8 vehicles had filled the small parking lot in front of Hawkins' gun and ammunition. The men who climbed out of those vehicles looked like typical Arizona residents. Some wore cowboy boots and jeans. Others had on shorts and polo shirts. One wore a Phoenix Suns basketball jersey. None of them looked particularly threatening individually, but together they moved with a synchronization and purposefulness that suggested military training. Tom approached the gun store first, with the others following in a loose formation that appeared casual but allowed them to monitor all exits and approaches. Old habits died hard. The bell chimed as Tom entered the shop. Dale Hawkins looked up from paperwork behind the counter, immediately noticing that his afternoon had suddenly become much busier. The same 2 customers from earlier were still browsing, though they now looked up with interest as more men continued entering the store. "Afternoon?" Tom said politely, approaching the counter with a slight smile. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Dale nodded cautiously. "Can I help you, gentlemen, with something?" "I hope so," Tom replied. "We're here about a customer service issue. A friend of ours was in here earlier today and had a disappointing experience." Behind Tom, the other SEALs spread out naturally through the store, looking at merchandise but maintaining awareness of the situation. To a casual observer, they appeared to be a group of friends shopping together. Dale's eyes darted between the men, clearly recognizing that something was different about this group. They moved like soldiers or police officers, with a controlled alertness that suggested training and experience. "What kind of customer service issue?" Dale asked carefully. "Well," Tom continued conversationally, "our friend came in to make a legitimate purchase. She had proper identification, training, and legal right to buy a firearm. But apparently she was told to leave because she's a woman and her husband wasn't with her." Mike Gonzalez looked up from examining a rifle display. "That doesn't sound like very good customer service." Dan Torres nodded from near the handgun case. "Definitely not the kind of treatment we'd expect for military spouses in our community." Dale's complexion had begun to pale. "Military spouses?" "Oh, yes," Tom said pleasantly. "Our friend Sarah is married to Marcus Martinez. Good man, Marcus. He's currently deployed overseas, serving his country, leaving his wife to handle family business, including home security." The older customer from earlier was now backing toward the door, clearly sensing tension. The younger man in camouflage gear stood frozen, realizing he was witnessing something significant. "Now," Tom continued, "Marcus can't be here to support his wife right now because he's busy with national security matters. So we thought we'd stop by and make sure she gets the respect and service she deserves as a member of our military community." Dale had figured out who these men were, or at least what they represented. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to maintain composure. "Look," I didn't mean any disrespect. Sometimes I'm just cautious about sales, especially when someone seems inexperienced. Rodriguez, who had been examining ammunition displays, spoke up without turning around. Inexperienced? From what I heard, she had completed safety training and range practice. Sounds pretty responsible to me. Stevens added, more responsible than a lot of customers, I'd bet. Thompson, browsing near the tactical gear, shook his head sadly. It's disappointing when military families face discrimination in their own communities. Dale was sweating now, despite the air conditioning. Gentlemen, I think there might be some misunderstanding. I run a legitimate business here. Tom nodded. I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you want to continue running a legitimate business, which is why we're here for a friendly conversation about customer service standards. The young customer in camouflage finally found his voice. Hey, aren't you guys citizens concerned about community standards? Mike Gonzalez finished firmly, looking directly at him. Dale cleared his throat nervously. What exactly do you want from me? Simple, Tom replied. We want to make sure that when military spouses come into your store, they receive the same professional service as any other customer. No discrimination based on gender, no assumptions about capability, no disrespectful treatment. And, Dan Torres added, we want to make sure that if Sarah decides to come back and complete her purchase, she'll be treated with the courtesy and respect she deserves. The shop had fallen completely silent, except for the humming air conditioning and the distant sounds of traffic outside. The 8 SEALs maintained their casual positions throughout the store, but their presence filled the space with quiet intensity. Dale looked around at the men, finally understanding the full scope of what was happening. These weren't random, angry customers. These were professional warriors who took care of their own. I think I may have been hasty earlier, he managed. Maybe I didn't give the lady a fair chance. Tom smiled, but his eyes remained serious. Maybe you didn't. The good news is that mistakes can be corrected. Learning opportunities can be valuable for everyone involved. Rodriguez finally turned around from the ammunition display. The question is, what are you going to learn from this opportunity? Dale swallowed hard, looking around at the faces watching him. These men weren't threatening him directly, but their very presence was a powerful reminder of the consequences of disrespecting military families. I think I've learned that I should treat all customers with respect, regardless of who they're married to or whether their spouse is present. That's a good start, Mike Gonzalez said approvingly. And, Dale continued, his voice growing steadier, if Mrs. Martinez wants to come back and look at firearms, I'll be happy to provide professional service and answer any questions she has about our inventory. Tom nodded. That sounds like excellent customer service, the kind that builds community trust and loyalty. The tension in the room began to ease slightly, though the SEALs maintained their positions. They had made their point without raising their voices or making threats. Sometimes, presence and reputation were more effective than aggression. Outside, more vehicles had arrived in the parking lot. Other shoppers in the strip mall had noticed the unusual gathering and were watching from a distance, phone cameras discreetly recording. Dale glanced nervously toward the windows. Gentlemen, I appreciate the educational opportunity. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Tom looked around at his teammates, receiving slight nods of confirmation. I think we've covered the main points. Unless anyone has questions about customer service standards. The shop remained quiet for a long moment. Then Stevens spoke up from near the rifle display. Just one thing. This kind of professional development opportunity probably shouldn't be necessary in the future, right? Dale nodded quickly. Right. Absolutely right. Tom Richardson was the last to leave Hawkins' Gun and Ammunition, pausing at the counter where Dale stood pale and shaken. Mr. Hawkins, I want to be clear about something. We're not here to threaten you or harm your business. We're here because military families deserve respect in their communities. Dale nodded quickly. I understand. And I want you to know that Mrs. Martinez is welcome back any time. I'll personally make sure she gets excellent service." "I appreciate that," Tom replied, "and I'm sure you'll extend that same courtesy to all military spouses and family members who visit your store." "Absolutely. No question about that." Tom glanced around the shop one final time. The older customer had long since left, but the young man in camouflage gear remained frozen near the tactical display, clearly understanding he had witnessed something significant. "Good afternoon, then," Tom said politely, and walked out to join his teammates in the parking lot. The 8 SEALs gathered in a loose circle between their vehicles, speaking in low voices while curious onlookers watched from the other businesses in the strip mall. Their conversation was brief and professional. "Think he got the message?" Mike Gonzalez asked. Dan Torres chuckled. "I think his underwear got the message." "The question is whether it sticks," Rodriguez added. "Some people need ongoing education." Tom looked back toward the gun store. "He'll remember. And if he doesn't, word will get around the community pretty quickly about what happens when military families get mistreated." Stevens checked his watch. "Should someone call Sarah and let her know she can try again?" "Let me handle that," Tom said. "But let's give Dale a little time to process today's lesson before she goes back." The group began dispersing to their vehicles. As they drove away, Dale Hawkins remained behind his counter, staring at the door and replaying the last 30 minutes in his mind. 2 hours later, Sarah was sitting in Jessica's kitchen, holding a cup of coffee and listening to her friend recount the afternoon's events. Tom had called Jessica with a brief summary, but hearing the details left Sarah with mixed emotions. "I can't believe they did that," Sarah said, shaking her head. 8 of them just showed up. "Tom said it was very professional," Jessica explained. "No threats, no yelling. Just a conversation about community standards and customer service." "I feel terrible that they felt they had to do that." Jessica set down her own coffee cup and looked directly at Sarah. "Don't you dare feel terrible about this. You did nothing wrong. You were discriminated against, and your military family stepped up to address it. That's what community means." Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize with a local area code. "Hello? Mrs. Martinez? This is Dale Hawkins from Hawkins Gun and Ammunition. I wanted to call and apologize for my behavior earlier today." Sarah looked at Jessica with raised eyebrows. "Oh, thank you for calling, Mr. Hawkins." "I was completely out of line," Dale continued. "I made assumptions about you that were unfair and unprofessional. I'd like to invite you back to complete your purchase, and I promise you'll receive the respectful service you deserve." "I appreciate that, Mr. Hawkins. Could you come in tomorrow afternoon? I'd be happy to show you those models you were interested in and answer any questions you have. And there won't be any attitude or disrespect from me or anyone else in my store." Sarah considered the offer. Part of her wanted to find a different gun store and avoid the whole situation. But another part of her recognized the importance of seeing this through. "I'll be there tomorrow around 2 o'clock, she said. "Perfect. I'll have those firearms ready for you to examine, and we'll take care of all the paperwork professionally and courteously. Again, I sincerely apologize for my behavior today." After hanging up, Sarah looked at Jessica. "He wants me to come back tomorrow." "Are you going to?" "I think so. If I don't, he might go back to treating the next military spouse the same way." "And if he gives you any problems tomorrow?" Sarah smiled slightly. "I have a feeling he won't." The next afternoon, Sarah returned to Hawkins Gun and Ammunition, wearing a confident expression and carrying her research notes. The parking lot looked normal, with just a few cars scattered around the strip mall. The bell chimed as she entered, and Dale immediately looked up from behind the counter. His demeanor was completely different from the day before. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, coming around the counter to greet her. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. I have those firearms you wanted to see ready for inspection." The transformation was remarkable. Dale was professional. knowledgeable and respectful throughout the entire process. He answered her technical questions thoroughly, explained the background check procedures clearly, and treated her exactly like he would any serious customer. The Glock 19 has a slightly larger grip than the M&P Shield, he explained, showing her the difference. But it also holds more rounds. The Sig Sauer has a different trigger mechanism that some people prefer. Would you like to handle all three and see which feels most comfortable? Sarah spent 45 minutes examining the firearms, asking questions and comparing features. Dale was patient and informative, never once suggesting she was incapable or inexperienced. I think I'd like the Glock 19, she finally decided. It feels right in my hands and the safety features are what I'm looking for. Excellent choice, Dale said. That's a reliable firearm with a good reputation. Let me get the paperwork started. As they completed the federal background check forms and state requirements, Dale made casual conversation about firearms safety and storage recommendations. He even threw in a discount on a gun safe when he learned she had young children at home. Mrs. Martinez, Dale said as he processed her payment, I want you to know that you're welcome in this store anytime, and I hope you'll recommend us to other military families in the area. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I appreciate the professional service today. Dale handed her the receipt and information packet. Would you like me to recommend a good local range where you can practice with your new firearm? Actually, I've been using the range on base, but a civilian option might be convenient too. Dale wrote down the name and address of 2 nearby ranges, along with notes about their military discounts and family-friendly policies. As Sarah prepared to leave with her purchase, Dale cleared his throat. Mrs. Martinez, could I ask you a favor? What's that? If any of your husband's friends ask about your experience today, could you let them know that we've committed to treating all military families with the respect they deserve? Sarah smiled. I'll be sure to mention that you provided excellent customer service today. Thank you. And please tell your husband that we support our military personnel and their families. Sarah left the store feeling satisfied not just with her purchase, but with the resolution of the previous day's conflict. As she drove home, she reflected on the experience and what it meant. That evening, she video-called Marcus on his deployment. The connection was grainy, and the time difference meant it was early morning where he was stationed, but seeing his face made her feel better about everything. So you got the gun? Marcus asked, adjusting his laptop camera. Yes, and the whole situation worked out well. Your teammates made sure I was treated with respect. Marcus grinned. Those guys don't mess around when it comes to taking care of family. I hope that shop owner learned something. I think he did. He was completely professional today. Almost like a different person. Good. You shouldn't have to deal with discrimination anywhere, but especially not in our own community. Sarah told him about the gun store owner's apology and changed attitude. I think this might actually be a good thing for other military spouses. If word gets around that the community won't tolerate disrespectful treatment, it might prevent problems for other families. That's one of the things I love about you, Marcus said, always thinking about how to help other people. 3 weeks later, Sarah ran into another military spouse at the commissary on base. The woman, Linda, mentioned that she had been considering purchasing a firearm for home protection while her husband was deployed. I've heard mixed things about the gun stores in town, Linda said. Some of them supposedly aren't very welcoming to women shopping alone. Sarah smiled. Actually, I had a great experience at Hawkins Gun and Ammunition. The owner was very professional and helpful. He even gave me military spouse discount and recommended good storage options for homes with children. Really? I'd heard he could be difficult. Maybe in the past, but he seems to understand the importance of supporting military families now. I'd definitely recommend giving him a try. Word spread through the military spouse network about Dale's improved customer service. Over the following months, several other wives and family members visited his store and received professional, respectful treatment. Dale, for his part, had genuinely learned from the experience. The visit from Marcus's SEAL team had been a wake-up call about his own biases and the importance of treating all customers fairly. He began actively promoting his store's support for military families and even sponsored a local military spouse organization. 6 months later, when Marcus returned from deployment, he and Sarah visited the gun store together. Dale recognized Sarah immediately and greeted both of them warmly. "Mr. Martinez," Dale said, shaking Marcus's hand, "your wife is one of our best customers, and I want you to know that we consider it an honor to serve military families in our community." Marcus looked around the store, noting the military families welcome signs and photos of local service members that Dale had added to his displays. "I appreciate that, Mr. Hawkins. My wife told me you provided excellent service when she purchased her firearm." "It was my pleasure," Dale replied, "and I hope you'll both consider us for any future firearms needs." As they left the store, Marcus put his arm around Sarah. "I'm proud of how you handled that whole situation, standing up for yourself and other military spouses." "I had good backup," Sarah replied, thinking about the 8 SEALs who had taught an important lesson about community, respect, and the consequences of discrimination. The story became something of a legend in the local military community, though the details grew and shifted with each telling. What remained constant was the message: military families look out for each other, and disrespectful treatment has consequences. Dale Hawkins never forgot the lesson he learned that afternoon. And Sarah Martinez never again worried about being treated with anything less than complete respect when conducting business in her community. The incident had transformed not just individual attitudes, but had strengthened the bonds between military families and their civilian neighbors. Sometimes, the most powerful lessons come not from grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but from quiet demonstrations of solidarity and the simple insistence that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. The 8 men who walked into that gun store had delivered exactly that kind of lesson, and the effects rippled through their community for years to come.